Hello. I am Meg Tuten. I have um worked on a bunch of podcasts at this point. You've probably if you saw the talk that Henry Galley was giving like 2 hours ago, pretty much everything he did, I also did, because we're partners and we live together. And today I'm going to talk to you about world building for audio drama. I have not been a showrunner for very long, but I have been a world builder for a long time in my head. Um, I think I've always been interested in like sort of intricate details of fantasy worlds. I've always been really interested in sort of like imagining how things would be if things worked differently, or like, if history had moved a certain way. And that has been a lifelong passion of mine. And I've really gotten to play in that space for the first time, like properly, with the Kingmaker Histories, which is the show that I am the showrunner of. So I'm going to break this talk down into like wait just a sec. Um I'm going to break this talk down into the writing side of things and the production side of things. So the writing side of things, because it's when you're specifically world building for audio drama, the production is what makes it different from world building to any other medium, because you are working, with tools that you wouldn't have if you were making a book or a comic or a television series. So the writing advice is going to basically cover like general things that could be used for any other medium, but the production advice is going to get a little more granular, and I'm going to bring in some like specific things that I do when I'm actually making the Kingmaker histories, because I showrun and sound design that. And I've also sound designed a few episodes of Georgie Romero's Done For, which I think my world building sort of process comes through a little bit in that as well. And then I've got the upcoming Killjam Triple X, which I did not write, but that I'm going to be sound designing as well. So, the most important thing about world building is that every story about a fantasy world is a story about our world, and every story about the past or the future is a story about the present. Um, you are reflecting your lived existence and your opinions and your politics and your beliefs into your fantasy world. And so, it's kind of impossible to make a good world without having a grasp on like a theme. Setting is in service of theme, characters in service of theme. The theme is kind of the most important thing of the story, because that is what's going to keep it focused, and that is what is going to sort of make it be about something. Because without a theme, your story is just going to be a list of stuff that happened. It's not really going to be cohesive. Um, there's a book called The Anatomy of Story by John Truby that I have uh, found really useful in writing. And I know Henry brought this up too, but the he has the concept of the story world, which is like not just like the broader setting, but like the specific bit of it. And that is going to be informed by your story's theme. You don't actually need to start with a theme though. It can be really, I know it can sound really threatening to think like, oh, I have to have a theme right off the bat. You don't, because like I said, all of your writing is going to reflect your beliefs and your outlook on the world. So even if you just kind of brainstorm, if you just come up with stuff that you think is cool, scenes that you would like to have, characters you would like to have interact with each other, um, you're going to find that certain topics come up again and again in your work. And from that, you will be able to sort of draw the line of your theme. Um, Once you have written sort of you start with your like brainstorm. And once you've brainstormed all of these ideas, analyze the topics and the motifs and the tropes that you go back to and identify that in a statement. And that is what John Truby calls the the designing principle of a story. And that having a designing principle makes it a lot easier to world build. Because the theme will enrich your world building. Your setting reflects and enriches your theme, and your theme then feeds back into the setting. So, to take a specific audio drama example, the show Gastronaut is themed around food and the way that people prepare food differently in different cultures and the sort of politics of how food gets to where it's going. And so the main character of that is a food critic. And that's sort of the theme of it, informing the story, informing where he's going to go, because, it's always going to be starting off with like restaurants and food service. Similarly, the show Windfall I would describe the designing principle as Windfall as it's a story about the way systems of oppression exploit and widen class divides. And what is a better setting to illustrate that than a vertical city where the richest people live on the top floor and the poorest people live on the bottom floor? So that is what I mean when I say that setting is in service to the theme. Theme is also really good for keeping your story focused, because world building gives you a very specific kind of brainworms. I have found from experience. You are always going to be tempted with the desire to go and come up with every single tiny pointless little detail. I like to call this the instinct to soil map world build, which is like a form of procrastination, basically, because it's like, oh, I was writing, and then I spent 8 hours coming up with a soil map for my main character's hometown, and you feel like that's fun and productive in the moment, but then it doesn't actually do anything. You're not going to use that in the story. Be honest with yourself. You just did that because you thought soil maps would be cool. So having a theme in mind is going to stop you from doing that. It is going to be what stops you from going wildly off topic. World building details. So you start with the details that are you start with the details that are the most relevant to your story, and then everything else you can make up as you go. I am a very big believer in making up things as you go, because I think that plans fail a lot of the time. If you're the kind of person who can sit down and plan stuff like very intricately and use outlines and things like that, I'm very jealous of you. I don't know where you get this power, but I don't have it. Whenever I have plans, I always end up, hitting a roadblock, whether that's realizing an error, like a plot hole early on, that I then have to like rewrite everything around. Well, so, sorry, it's really hot here. Can you tell, guys? All right. I'm gonna have a sip of water. Where's my water? Okay. A mistake that I see people making a lot with their world building is they get really locked in to certain ideas. They overplan ahead of time, and I find that sometimes that can close you off from a lot of possibilities. So you need to stay flexible. Um, the possibility for your story should always be the number one priority. If you come up with new permutations of an element of your world that would allow for greater plot possibilities, it is okay to change what you've already written. It is okay to go back and shuffle things around because at the end of the day, it's not real. You know, people don't actually have to live here. You are the god of this world you're creating, and there's no like you know, once something is written down, it is mutable. It's not completely set in stone. So keep your mind open, especially because when you do research, you're gonna find things that make you, as you learn more about the world, the actual world that we live in right now, you're gonna find more details that are gonna give you new ideas, and that is the best way to get inspiration for world building. Is that other artists can serve as a really good starting point, but you need to be looking at reality because that is where you're going to get your best ideas. It is a total cliche to say that truth is stranger than fiction, but it is. Um, so research widely, look into different sciences, look into history, really dig into the history of the place where you live. Um, just, you know, really become a student of the world, and it's going to open up doors that you didn't know existed for like what you can do and where you can go. Um so that's really all of the writing advice that I had in terms of world building. Just, you know, um create based around a theme, keep yourself focused to what's going to be actually useful in the story, and be flexible with the non-essential details. Um take in stuff from the world around you, and just have fun playing around. Um, you know, so now I'm going to get into sort of the more technical side of things for um things that I think are really specific to working in an audio medium. Oh, I've got oh, wait, I will answer a couple of these questions before I go into the production side of things. All right. Um what are some key things the audience should know pretty early on in the story to understand the world? So you um what are some key things the audience should know pretty early on in the story to understand the world? It's really going to depend on the story that you're telling. But basically when it comes to like exposition, which is what I think this is asking about. When it comes to exposition, I think at the beginning, you keep it to the bare minimum that you need to be able to understand what is happening in the plot. So to use the example of um the Kingmaker histories, my series. In the first couple of episodes, you over the course of it, you find out there is a country that trades with other dimensions. The people there can use magic, and there was a big revolution 25 years ago. And that's really all you need to know. Everything else can be intuited from context clues. Context clues are your best friend when you're world building. Anything that you can sort of, this is not like unique advice. This is just general storytelling advice. I mean, you're probably all very sick of hearing show don't tell, but sometimes it's true. Um, and sometimes, yeah, sometimes showing it can get confusing in audio drama because you kind of always have to be telling, But, like, sometimes, just having a character mention something in a very casual way or, having something, um, things that are brought up naturally instead of having characters just kind of stop and give explanations to the audience. And then Astral Fire asked, "Any tips on how to know when world building has become procrastination?" When you are coming up with stuff that you don't know how you're gonna use it yet. That's usually the first sign. When you're really deep into coming up with stuff and you have no idea how or when it's going to be implemented in the story. Like I um I had I have this notebook that's my world building notebook. And currently in there are notes on all of these other like fantasy races that I would like to have show up. I don't know if I'll actually use any of them. So I stopped planning what I was going to do with them. So for right now, they're just drawings and like tiny little stat notes. I might flesh them out further if I come up with something to use them for. But if I don't, I haven't wasted a huge amount of time on it. So yeah, the answer to how to know when your world building has become procrastination is if you are coming up with very specific, very detailed things that you have no idea how they're gonna slot in to the story that you're telling. Um, so now I'm going to talk about the production side of things. When you are creating for audio, you have a really unique set of challenges that people who are making for other mediums don't have. You are completely unable to use visuals. And if you are somebody like me who comes from a visual arts background or even like prose, like novel or short story writing background, you are going to feel very restricted at first when it comes to building a world for a purely audio medium. Um, but kind of like, you know, if you can train yourself, like Daredevil style, you will get really good at perceiving things through audio and thinking in terms of audio when you wouldn't normally. It's all a matter of shifting your focus from visuals to sounds. Um, Listen really closely to everything. If you are not if you're a writer and you're not the sound designer, you should be talking you should be having like very frequent conversations with the person who's going to be sound designing your work because I think it's a good idea to plan some of this stuff together. And also from a sound designer's perspective, as somebody who's done both, I think for you are doing your sound designer a big, big favor if you are thinking in terms of audio yourself, because you can give more specific instructions for what you want them to do. So, I would advise keeping like a note on your phone or like a notebook and just listening out for sounds. When you're watching TV or movies, pay attention to what the sound design is like in those TV and movies. Like, um, pay attention to what other sound designers are doing. Um, Pay attention to just like the sounds that are out in the world and think about what sounds you associate with your other senses. So like say like the sound of like sizzling like evokes the smell of like sausages on a barbecue. So that is a sound that you would want to put into like a scene at a market where they're selling a lot of street food. Just like that's a very basic example, but just like think about what sounds do you associate with different seasons? What sounds do you associate with different places? So if you wanna, if your world is really hot, um, put in like cicada sound effects. If it's cold, put in the sounds of like wind blowing in the trees. Um, just do anything, and it doesn't have to be representational. This is the most important thing for building a world just using sound, is that the sound doesn't necessarily have to be representational, because your goal is just to kind of incept the image of the vibe into your audience's head. I also find a good way to like get used to like learning, um kind of building associations between sounds and visuals in your mind, is just go on YouTube and look up like 9 hour medieval village Dungeons and Dragons game background ambience ASMR. Think about, listen to those and pay attention to them and just be like, "Oh, okay, so they've got, these sounds and this picture together, and that is creating association in my mind." Um so I really find that like ambient textures can be a good cheat for um conveying the vibes. So like in Kingmaker, there's a lot of different recurring environments. And this was a big learning curve for me. I kind of had to learn it on the go because I'd never really done sound design before. But by paying attention to just what everything sounds like and what sounds are in movies and YouTube videos that I'm watching, I was able to get into it. Um, so for like the van that the gang drives around in, the sounds that I've got in that are like electric lamp humming, and then under that I have a very like a creaking wooden boards, almost like the sound of a ship moving, which when you think about it really doesn't make any sense for like why a car would make that noise. But you hear that sound, you picture like wood paneling, you picture gas lamps, you are picturing steampunk. So that's, and then for the I did similar things when I was working on Georgie Romero's Done For. I had like kind of creaking trees and like Halloween witch and ghost stock sound effects that I kind of layered into every scene under it, just because, it's not like diegetically there. It's just you are communicating to your audience, this is a spooky house. This is a spooky Halloween town. Um Similarly with Killjam Triple X, which is going to be coming out later this year, I've got like royalty free like techno bass lines that I kind of like put very quietly under everything, because that just to me makes it sound like the future a little bit more. Um all right. Um yeah, so if you're a writer, if you're the audio engineer of your show, great, this is going to be very easy for you to do. But if you are the writer, like talk to your sound designer about this. Like, make a list, be specific, suggest things that they can use. Like Henry was actually the one that sent me Henry had this Google Doc that just had links to videos of like sounds, noises that were in the public domain. And one of them was the sound of the radiation that comes off of the planet Uranus. And it is the bug sound in the Salzmanwald. Whenever they go to the Salzmanwald in the Kingmaker histories, the droning bugs, that is actually the sound of a planet in our solar system. And I thought that that was just a really great way to communicate that an alien environment, and I never would have thought that if Henry hadn't suggested it to me. So yeah, like work with your writer, work with your sound designer, go back and forth, talk about this stuff. Hell, make a Pinterest board and try to think, how do I make it sound like these images? Like it is kind of like training yourself to have synesthesia. Um, Hi Lou. I'm about to talk about Ealer's Choice, so it's good that that Lou's here. Um, you mentioned the Anatomy of Story by John Truby, which is a great text. Do you have any other book recommendations? Um, and somebody else said they you close your eyes and try to hear the environment. That's exactly um that's that's a really good way of doing it too. That's exactly what I'm saying. Just like, try and see with your ears. Be Daredevil. Be Daredevil in real life. Anyway, so um I want to talk about music. Music is a really, really good world building tool. Um, so on the one hand, there's diegetic music, and the other hand, there's non-diegetic music. I can never remember which one's which, but okay. So the music that actually like exists in universe, is obviously a great world building tool because when you think about, I realize now that I forgot one of my writing tips, and I'm gonna circle back to it real quick. Um, anyway, so world building is always better when it's from a humanistic perspective. Um, if you if you can imagine like what the life of an average person is like in a world, you're going to be more immersed in it. You're going to become more attached to the characters. Whereas if you can't really picture what like a normal guy who's not involved in the story, what his day is going to be like, if you can't picture that, it's going to be harder to put yourself into the story. It's like what do the people in this world like, what kind of clothes do they wear, what food do they eat, what do they do for fun, what is this universe's version of going home and just like putting on the TV and like watching the footy with a beer, what do people do at the end of a long day at whatever kind of job people have in this world, just like it's it's all well and good to know like the biome and like the history of the kingdom's rulers, and like the kind of technology that exists or like the magic system, but like literally what is this universe's version of going home and turning on the footy after a long day at work? What is this what festivals do they celebrate? What do people do for fun? That's a really, really important part of world building, and like the number one thing that takes me as a reader out of a universe is when I can't picture what life is like when the story is not happening in this world. Um, so anyway, circling back to music because um music is obviously a part of like the human culture of your world that you're creating, or human or like whatever fantasy sci-fi species that exists in your world. um so music goes a long way towards helping you paint your sound picture. um the diegetic music, obviously, like what kind of music are characters actually listening to, what genres exist, what instruments do they play, put those in your soundscape. um have characters talk about the music that they listen to. That's one of my favorite little things to do, is having, characters talk about like music and books and like pop culture, because that's the conversations that I have with most of my friends are about pop culture. But also the non-diegetic music. Um and if you don't have like people that that are musicians, if you don't have like a composer, I would definitely recommend checking out like public domain music archives. But also, Epidemic Sound is a good friend of mine because they have incredibly niche like micro genres of music. And I think that putting like having a really cohesive mix of genres, or even just like one genre of music, show up in your non-diegetic, like your score, um that is world building as well in a weird way because it is, like I said, it is incepting the vibes into your listener's head. It is getting across a picture using just sounds. Use So everything that they can hear, use that to build the world. So for example, the show Fox and Stallion, all of their incidental music is very like piano and harpsichord heavy. It sounds very classical. It is absolutely perfect for a show that is a Victorian Sherlock Holmes spoof. Immediately, conjures images of that time period and like it's perfect for painting a picture of the vibe. Likewise, Eula's Choice, hi Lou, I know you're there. Eula's Choice has bespoke sea shanties. The audio, like the incidental background music, it's very percussion heavy. There's lots of fiddles. It really does sound like a nautical dark fantasy. So I think, and the funny thing is that in my admittedly a little bit limited experience with audio drama, I find that like scoring is not as common as I think it should be. And that makes sense because, this is a pretty lo-fi um medium, and not everybody knows composers, not everybody is going to be able to have custom made music, but you would be surprised what you could find that is available for free. Like in the first 2 seasons of Kingmaker, I almost actually no, I entirely exclusively used no copyright music that I found on YouTube. And that was like I just happened to luck out and I found a YouTube channel who posts very like wonky, quirky, plinky music. Um but now, now that the show's been going on for a while and it got more elaborate, I'm now incorporating other music in, and I find a lot of my music on Epidemic Sound. Same goes for Kill Jam Triple X. So like for Kingmaker, our soundtrack is, a lot of accordions, a lot of toy piano. It's quirky, it's weird, it's wonky, it's European. With Kill Jam Triple X, the soundtrack to that show is going to be mostly synthwave and hyperpop, which I think illustrates a kind of like hyper capitalist dystopian future very well. Um, so to sum up on the production side of things, um, I I think it's all about painting a picture using sounds. Train yourself to listen. Um, think really deeply about what sounds you associate with different smells, different textures, different colors, different seasons, different temperatures. Just f- really think. If you pay close enough attention and if you really practice, you can sort of communicate all 5 senses through sound if you really, really think outside the box and try and focus really hard. So anatomy. So Astral Fire asked me. I mentioned Anatomy of a Story by John Truby, which is a great text. Do you have any other book recommendations? I have not read a lot of books that specifically talk about setting building, but I have read a lot of books that are world building books. As in, the book is a world building project. So I um I love the like I loved the Dinotopia books when I was a kid. That is a brilliant, just like the thing about books is that you can have a book that's just world building because that's basically what Dinotopia was. It's like, here are the songs that they sing in Dinotopia. Here are the names of all of the buildings, and like they're they're fantastic. But I also have this book right here called another example of a book that's really good for masterclass in world building is this one, Expedition by Wayne Douglas Barlow. I think it's out of print at the moment, but I am absolutely obsessed with this book. And honestly, this is a good example of like how world building communicates theme because this book is from the perspective of a naturalist from the year 2358 who is the first human to set foot on the planet Darwin 5. And in the foreword, he talks about how his grandfather told him stories about a time when animals roamed wild on the earth. So the theme is conservation here. The theme is humans need to appreciate the world that they have on Earth um, before going out to look for new ones. And if we ever do discover a new world, we need to treat it with more respect than we treat the world that we're on now. So that's a good example of how the format of a story and the world building of the story and like what details are included um, can really enrich a theme. What other books do I have? Um, yeah, so I also have the Kong Skull Island um companion book from 2005, the Peter Jackson King Kong. That is an example, I think, of I think Peter Jackson really fell down the soil map world building hole a little bit with that one because that book is so detailed. There is so much stuff that they came up with for Skull Island. Like absolutely devastating the amount of stuff that they came up with for the Skull Island portion of that movie. And so much of it had to be cut anyway. I think um I can't think of any other books. Um I read a lot of books on history for world building inspiration as well. Absolutely like core text for writing the Kingmaker histories was a book called The Three Emperors by Miranda Carter, which is kind of um a sort of month by month, year by year breakdown of everything that led up to World War One and how it happened with King George V, Kaiser Wilhelm II, and Tsar Nicholas II. And history, I got some of my best ideas from that book, and I've gotten a lot of really good world building ideas from like I got another book back here called Carnage, which is a true crime book. It is the life story of the succulent Chinese meal guy. And it goes in really detailed about Australian criminal culture in the 70s and the 80s. And that has been very inspirational for me because, I write a lot of, in Kingmaker, I write a lot of characters who are gangsters. I write a lot of stuff that's involved in crime. And so getting to know aspects of that underworld in the real world have really helped me out with making up my fantasy world. So yeah, the books that I would recommend are just like any book that is about stuff you want to put in your fantasy world. So, if you're writing something about space, like, read up on sort of theoretical spaceship designs and like exoplanet research and space travel. And I would say like you can you can find a lot of inspiration for from anywhere. And I would say that, like, if you were specifically gonna write something about, like, space travel, I would say that, like, old ship's logs from the age of exploration would probably be really inspirational to you as well, because those there's not really any easy equivalent now to how long and grueling a space voyage would be. But, back in history, before the invention of airplanes, all international travel was really long and arduous and dangerous in the way that space travel would be if we had access to it. So, history is your best teacher. Science is your second best teacher. Um, that is about all that I had written for notes. So, I would like to open the floor up to any further questions. And I realize that I have been a little bit all over the place. But hopefully, things that I said were comprehensible. But if not, feel free to ask questions. Thank you. Thank you. Um, oh, also, like, I said a lot of stuff that would help for world building, but, like, in the specific realm of magic systems, I did a video on Gus's YouTube channel, We're Not Alive. I did a video about magic systems. So, if you would like to hear specific thoughts that I have had in the past about magic systems, um, I did one of those. Just search "We Are Not Alive" magic systems. I'm glad that people have found this helpful. Well, the idea of giving the listener synesthesia was super helpful. I think, well, it's good that you have it. 8-bit, 8-bit BIM. It's good that you have it because I was actually saying I was also saying giving yourself synesthesia, but you've already done that, so you're one step ahead of me. Check connecting to the way the words affect the world. Um, yeah, that's a really interesting wrinkle that specifically comes in if you're doing, like, um, stuff that's, like, less based on the present day world. Like, the example, um, I've seen a lot of people say that, like, you have to be really careful writing your characters swearing in fantasy books, because if you include certain swears that we have in English, you are implying the existence of Christianity in your fantasy world. Um, and that is really funny, and I do find myself often, like, having to look up in writing Kingmaker, having to look up, like, when a certain thing was invented. There was one script, I don't think it hasn't come out yet. I think, or it was a scene that was scrapped where I had a character say, um it's not rocket science, and then I remembered that rockets hadn't been invented yet. So I changed it to something like it's not portal conjuring, which felt a little more world specific. Uh it's the what do they call it on TV tropes? Hold your hippogriffs. That is a very that's a part of your world building that you I find myself forgetting a lot. And so every once in a while I will realize that I've put in a line and it's just like, "Oh, what how would they know what that is?" Just like, how would they they can't use they can't use that expression. That hadn't been invented yet. But fun fact, ending a sentence with "not" sarcastically, the first time that was ever the first recorded use of that was 1895, so Eisen gets to do that sometimes, and that made me very, very happy. Yeah, in English is incredibly idiomatic. You need so much context. Really all languages to a certain degree are incomprehensible to people who did not grow up in the culture that produced the language. Um, all right. And if nobody has any more questions, I'm going to head off. Thank you so much for having me. Um, I am so happy to have been here. I realized I was a little scattered, but unfortunately, my concert is wearing off. So my thoughts are a little bit disorganized at the moment, but I'm glad that people understood what I was saying at least. Um, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me, everybody, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the convention.